all these rules, with the league, and you've been around for all these years. You've reported, you've been doing photography, and you've been around the NFL, you've been around the NBA, the NHL, and all these different. The two-line pass is gone with the NHL. The NFL, they're changing rules and making sure that the quarterback is protected, and you can't touch the wide receiver anymore. You're going to get a penalty. And then the NBA, it's no flagrant fouls. You can't put your hands on anybody anymore. If you put a pinky on somebody, you're going to call a foul. I mean, with the rule changes, the rule changes of your time, and now the new age of sports, do you think it has affected sports or made it better?
Well, hello?
Yeah, we're here.
Okay. Yeah, I think, to me, I look at, just say, the NBA. Now, we used to sneak into the new Madison Square Garden in 1967. You could walk all over the pathway under where they took tickets and everything. A guy would go up, he would have a ticket, he could run downstairs, there was a door on the side there, he opened the door and we scoot in. So we saw some games there where they didn't have a 3-point line, where there was more feeding inside, and you have a 24-second clock. Maybe it took 20 seconds before they got a shot off because they were passing and cutting and following through on that. Now you come down and you're chucking away from the 3-point line. It's a little different to me to watch that type of a game. These guys are great athletes now, wonderful athletes, well-conditioned athletes, year-round conditioning. But to me, it's a little bit different. In baseball today, to watch Bob Gibson pitch, to watch Don Drysdale pitch, to watch Tom Seaver pitch, Drysdale and Gibson, you didn't mess with them. They had a specific attitude of how they looked at a batter. If the batter looked the wrong way at them, they were giving a little chin music. If they said something, they'd probably stick it in their ear. and one time I went to an old-timers game at Shea. I'm diverting in a minute about Bob Gibson. And I was at an old-timers game at Shea, and I got on the field. I didn't have any credentials. I had to look out for people who checked IDs because I had none. And I'm sitting on the top step of the home team, the Mets dugout, and Bob Gibson is sitting down in the dugout. And I started to take out my camera, and I asked him, I said, Mr. Gibson, could I take a photo of you? He goes, well, you're going to make money on that? The way he said it was the way he would pitch, okay? What, are you going to make money on that? No, I said, maybe it's my daughter Carrie, or I want to keep it for myself. He said, then that's okay. And I have that photo. I'm looking at it right now. He's looking square at me, but that's the guy Gibson was. He was intimidating, but yet he was very nice to me, and he asked me where I was from and stuff like that. So that game has changed. The NHL, wonderful athletes. The game is a lot faster now. I think there's a lot more times when the goaltenders, keep the play going and everything, and the officials, but there's a lot more penalties for little stuff that would get away in the 60s and 70s when I watched, the Rangers with Gilbert, or even with the early Islanders with Bobby Nystrom and those guys. So to me, the game has changed a little bit for like the videotaping and stuff. You stop the game, I don't like it, but I'm an old school guy. I'm 73 now, so I like it the way it was when I was first starting to watch baseball, hockey, football, and basketball.
Dan, you referenced Tom Seaver, and one of the big things you were telling me about was the '69 Mets, one of the bigger underdog stories we've ever seen. Considering how badly they started, they were really bad to begin their franchise history. I think they had the second worst season of all time in 1964. Is there any point during that season where you ever believed they could do that? Or do you always thought the odds were still stacked against them, whether it was the Cubs, whether it was the Orioles, or whoever else they played against late in the season?
Well, I tell you, I went to the first Met game at the Polo Grounds. I remember going to the Polo Grounds on Memorial Day of 1962. It was a doubleheader against the Dodgers. Sandy Koufax pitched that night. Frank Robinson, Frank Howard in the second game hit one over the left field wall. And I started to root for the Mets because I was a National League guy because my father brought me to Everett Field to see the Dots. Okay? And the Mets, they were, what everybody says, they were lovable losers. But they had some players that were really starting to come up. Ron Hunt started, Eddie Kranepool. And then the Mets started to win with Hodges as the manager. And what I remember mostly about that 69 season, I was working in a school, cleaning schoolrooms. My friend Tom Leacock, his father worked in the school. They got me a job cleaning the whole school the whole summer. And you could turn on the radio and listen. If there was a Met day game, you could listen to the game. And what I remember in August, the Mets played the Cubbies in Chicago. And Al Weiss hits a home run. And the Mets won that game. And I thought from that time on that maybe there's an opportunity for the Mets to really progress and beat the Cubs. That was their arch rival at the time now. And that game was a big game for the Mets. So I think I started to look at it at the middle of August, that the Mets were going to start to take over a little bit. They had the pitching. They had some wonderful pitching with, Gentry and Seaver. And the money pitcher that I like, really, Jerry Kuzman. They had some great relievers between Cal Kuntz and McGraw and Taylor. And they brought back some players like Cardwell, and they had Don Clendenin they made a trade. And they platooned the second baseman and right fielders with Chance and Sloboda. So it kind of fell into place. And then I got married, first marriage. I got married in 1969. And this was funny because the pastor was late to go to our ceremony because he was watching the Mets play a doubleheader in San Francisco, and he forgot about the wedding for a couple of minutes. So we were late coming out to. And then I went to the Black Cat game with my friend Tom Leacock, and then the next I went back up to school in Maine, and then I came down for the '69 World Series, and I paid $10 for a ticket, and sat upstairs, and again, getting into games or seats was fairly easy now for me, and I knew the fans were going to run on the field at the end of the game, that fifth game, if the Mets won. So I kind of positioned myself towards the end of the Met dugout, behind the coach's box at first base. Now my idea was I had a plastic cup. My idea was to take the dirt from the pitcher's mound, put it in the cup, and then about 2 hours later, I had to get on a plane back up to Maine, go back to college. So everybody ran on the field. I couldn't get on near the pitcher's mound. I said, okay, I'll run and I'll get the home plate dirt. I couldn't get near there. But then I saw Bowie Kuhn and his entourage coming. They were in the stands, and they were being ushered off behind the big glass gates that were behind home plate at Shea Stadium. And I had a sport coat with a turtleneck on. And I said, okay, time to follow them in, and let me see if I can follow them. So I got right behind them, and I walked that long aisle under the stands, and Kuhn made a left turn. I followed him and another guy. And he walks in the Met dugout, Met locker room, and I walk in right behind. Now I'm in the locker room. I don't know what to do right now because there's too much yelling and so on and so forth. But right in front of me, about 10 feet in front of me, was a dialed telephone. And I said, okay, I'm going to pick up the phone. I got a dial tone. I dialed 9 and called up my friend. And I said, I'm in the Met locker room. I looked to the left. It was Gil Hodges' office, and he was in there. And then he had to come out. And then I said, okay, let me get the lay of the land. And I didn't have my camera with me because I was going back up to college. So I just walked around the Met locker room for a couple of minutes, got sprayed with a little bit of warm milk. Well, no, that was champagne. And I walked up to Don Cardwell, the only guy I asked for an autograph. And Don Cardwell was a big guy. He looked down at me, and I said to him, Mr. Cardwell, could I have your autograph? I want to do. My friend is kind of sick, so I want to give him your autograph. He goes, BS. It's for you, isn't it? I said, yeah, it's for me. Okay. And he signed it. and then I had to go to LaGuardia Airport to get home. But that year, like the U.S. Olympic team. That team came out of the cold, but I think the fans were so well endowed to the Mets that year for winning. You know, you had the men landing on the moon, and people said, you know, before the Mets win the World
Yeah,
Series,
the Earth is flat.
they're going to land on the moon, and they did, and the Mets won the World Series.
Dan, come on, man. I thought the Earth is flat. I mean, Steph Curry and then Kyrie Irving
And Shaq.
and Shaq, they all think the Earth is flat and nobody landed on the moon. I mean, seriously, some of these athletes are so really smart guys. They're just really intelligent guys. But my last question, and by the way, we are talking to longtime reporter and photographer Dan Carubia. My last question is, out of all these years you've been in, you know, in the sports market with reporting and photography, and I know your passion and your love is photography, is there any particular athlete that gave you the worst hard time taking a picture of them, or just couldn't stand anybody being around anybody? Is there any athlete, coach, manager, or GM out there that you took pictures of that just didn't want to be around anybody, including you?
All those years, there was one person, and it was recently. But everybody that I met, everybody that I interviewed, everybody that I spoke to, were very gracious in their time. Al Jackson, Keith Hernandez, Rod Gilbert, Bobby Nystrom. But there was one person I asked for an autograph one time, and he played with the Mets as number 33.
Patrick Ewing.
And Mr. Matt Harvey, not Ron Hunt, Matt Harvey. And he was the only guy that just, I guess he had to do other things, but he blew me off. And that was okay too. But all these times, these photos are for my grandkids now. This memoir that I'm going to be writing with the help of my friend Matt Silverman, these are going to be from my grandkids. And I just want to leave them a little legacy of a guy that was nuts trying to sneak on the field and be competitive. And then people didn't know who I was, so I interviewed them anyway. If you're quick, let me tell you a quick story.
Go ahead.
I was at the Jim Bunning perfect game with my dad. It was Father's Day 1964, okay? And it was a doubleheader. Rick Wise, 19-year-old kid, was pitching the second game. Years later, I'm at this old-timers game at Shea, and it started to rain. And I was on the field. I kind of got on the field. I didn't have credentials. I had to look for people who checked them because I didn't have any credentials. And I ran into the visiting dugout. And who do I sit next to? Rick Wise. I said, "Hi, Rick. How you doing?" I said, "I was at your game that you pitched. You were 19 years old." He goes, "Yeah." I said, "What do you remember?" And I didn't have anything to take. I said, "What do you remember mostly about that game?" He goes, "What I really remember? About the third inning, I walked the leadoff hitter. And the whole stadium stood up and cheered. They were yelling and screaming. I thought somebody ran on the field. Looking around like I was out of place, and Tony Taylor saw that I might have been, like, out of my mind a little bit, and he ran over to me from second base, and he said, "What's up?" He goes, I said, "Why is everybody cheering? Is somebody on the field?" He goes, "No. This is the first baseman runner the Mets had all day because he was pitching a perfect game." So these guys were just great. And I loved it, and I'll continue to try and do that. And I thank the Tri-City Valley Cats for letting me usher there and let me speak to a lot of the Astros minor league players and stuff for many years. So that's a wonderful opportunity there for me still to continue as an usher in Troy, New York.
Dan, before we let you go, why don't you tell the fans how they could find you and when's your memoir coming out?
Well, I'm just starting it. It'll probably be sometime towards the beginning of the year, and it'll be a really good, just my thoughts on everything from business and baseball and how you got knocked down in baseball, you dusted yourself off, and you got in the batter's box again, and you might have done the same thing in business. You might have got knocked down in a business scenario, and you dusted yourself off and you went ahead and you succeeded. So it's a lot to do with sports and business and baseball, friends and family.